They thought the movie was a fake that Cameron would never do. Additionally, let me clarify that it wasn't simply exposing Chrissy Lampkin that broke it. Everything she tried to keep, what did she say? Buried? Oh, nothing. It's significant that she acknowledged using Jim Jones was playing about as a pawn, spending years behind the scenes with Cameron. Cameron taped it on, which was the hardest part. But this isn't hip-hop and love drama. This is betrayal on a courtroom scale. Using burner phones, studio receipts, and a voice memo capable of destroying an entire Jim Jones didn't yell or cry during his career. Listened while sitting there as though he had simply observed his whole relationship brand. And his standing is in ruins, and he was unable to stop it. So now the problem is, was this all put up by did Cameron play the long game on the first day? And did Chrissy Lampkin ever show true loyalty? Or just an occasion to wear nice clothes? What's a publicly announced split is worse than a breakup? Treachery. And that's just what occurred between Lampkin and Chrissy Lampkin. Jim Jones and Cameron were involved in a controversy that has not only completely upended Dipset, but has also been questioned online. Everything was a deception from the start, similar to any other sloppy online rumor with a few whispers about a suspicious DM leak. And all of a sudden, an audio file surfaces that is not just any audio that is time-stamped privately and KHROS's. Unedited footage allegedly informing Cameron rather than Jim Jones, how she kept thinking about him all the time. The worst part, though, is that she says it. We're laughing and drinking wine, speaking of Jim Jones as a brand rather than a man. Yes, it burnt down with only one statement. 3 group conversations and change, turning Twitter into a graveyard. But let's retrace your steps for a moment, since this audio release wasn't unexpected. Based on those close to Cam's team, this wasn't an accident or a slip. It was planned. Revenge leak from an irate friend instead of a cold-blooded, calculating release by Cameron, who, as it appears, is finished. You can notice the friction when you play nice. Jim Jones and Cameron's relationship has been simmering under the surface for more than 10 years after Dipset's Heart. The culture valued brotherhood, but underlying the business dispute were creative distinctions, and women did drive a large gap between them. Yet years up until now, both sides have played it cool. Let's hear the audio now, followed by music. Itself, this wasn't discovered surreptitiously or taken from a cloud in accordance with people that have listened to the entire version that goes beyond the 40-second viral video. A private studio was used to capture this. The flat where Chrissy and Cameron live allegedly made contact 2 months ago, and Chrissy's voice may be heard clearly in this video. A day without any manipulation or distortion. She says, "Jim still thinks I'm in love regarding the idea of us, but he doesn't understand that I've been absent since I've been with him for a long period in interviews. But when it's sincere, with you," then she chuckles, but the camera doesn't say anything. Can detect the flicker of a lighter. Suddenly, a background rhythm begins to play, as if this is more than just a dispute. It is a sabotage soundtrack. Let's not act as though Chrissy has been spotless. People have been worried since the Moran Hotel movie was recalled last year, that the hazy footage at 2:14 a.m. entered a magnificent suite. I'm with Reggie, who was wearing a strange hoodie, similar to Cam's right now. According to Chrissy Lynn, it was her cousin. Jim didn't, and Cam denied everything. Even respond, but the audio now creates one. Claire Kahn was present, and Reggie was the untruth was layered, ghost. And if that wasn't sufficient, let's see what else was once included in the leak. Cameron asks her on tape, "Do you ever feel bad?" To which Chrissy replies without skipping a beat, "It's not spent 10 years giving him everything? And now I'm apparently doing that," includes what former VH1 employees say. Chrissy Lampkin, a member, had been complaining for years. She felt constrained by Jim's image, according to one former producer. Chrissy desired to change her brand, but she didn't wish to continue serving as the fiancé's support system. She desired to be the focal point rather than the co-star. And you know who bestowed to her the according to accounts? Focus Cameron. Cameron had been keeping an eye on everything. Months of intimate time with Chrissy Lampkin. Phones, aircraft, burners, secret conversations, and one, according to a source, Cam didn't just pull. He treated her as if she were a CEO switching a rival brand, which leads us to Jim Jones learning about Jim Dodge Live. Stream, yes. He wasn't notified beforehand. Didn't receive a polite call. He was mid-interview about his latest album win. He received a phone call from his assistant, and Jim Jones stated, pausing to look down. Listened to the tape a couple of times and just turned it off. He didn't knock over a table or charge outside, but instead he looked at the television and remarked, "That's her." Moments for Deeper fans worldwide understood this was more than just a celebrity drama, but an actual breakdown of love, dedication, and legacy. And it didn't finish there. A little while later, Mama Jones, Jim's, my mother, went live on Facebook. Swollen face, angry tone, and message. I informed him that my child wasn't yes, but he was ready for his fairy tale. Fairy tales are in a rage due to what the internet does. The internet did. As we dug further, Reddit posts appeared, contrasting Chrissy's audio with the leaked one in previous interviews. In 2018, Chrissy stated in the interview that Cameron is like family. Nothing compares between us. The receipts, however, indicate differently. Honey, even more amazing is the possibility that this has been a purposeful breakdown of the brand. Certainly, but a brand transfer as well, because some people think Chrissy Lampkin and Cam have their own spin-off in the works. Recording talks in silence, gathering footage and gathering drama to provide streaming in real-time providers take into account the opposing viewpoint of hip-hop. Love and raw, startling completely. Unscripted seems unrealistic. However, after learning that Cam's attorney just took action to protect intellectual property associated with captured video between July and October, yes, is considering this leak to be content. Not evidence, but here's where things get nasty. The audio leak wasn't the only tape. According to reports, 2 additional recordings. There is one from a VH1 backstage session, where Chrissy was said to have heard, requesting Mona Scott, "Could we please remove the sentence regarding Jim? It's no longer real, and I'm simply playing the second voicemail segment from Cameron to Chrissy, where she claims that I miss the old times. Jim was too preoccupied to pursue us. Influence, yet you still notice me." That final "you still see me," even though the line has become a meme. It's the week's hashtag WARCRY that's on lip syncs and TikTok tees, even petty. Remarks made by arbitrary reality celebs, and we stopped there because just as the Globe began reacting to the leak, Cameron himself ended his silent posting. Only one post to Instagram without any caption, with a dark screen and white letters, "You ought not to have taken sides" in just 9 hours. A post received 4.4 million likes. Hashtags, no follow-ups, only an electronic mic drop. But what even came next? Cameron was caught off guard because someone had a burner account that was anonymous. Owned by a former intern at VH1, stole a Dropbox folder, which includes images, trip invoices, and even a photograph of Cam and Chrissy Lampkin boarding a Chaos and a private jet too. Turkstering Jim Jones was admitted to the hospital the same week for exhaustion, and the fuse just was sparked because, if you believed the IG's apex was the audio leak, the aftermath was live. Although that was just the gown. What came next wasn't just, it was so outrageous that it killed the brand. The partnership and each falsehood they believed to be permanently buried. There were many people in the courtroom, including Jim Jones, who walked in unchained and all in black. No smile, no entourage. Only his attorney and Mama Jones, his mother, were standing behind him, wearing a church coat and toting Kleenex as though they were a tool. It took 15 minutes for Chrissy Lampkin to arrive. Mouth tight, hair slicked back. She was dressed as though she was going to a funeral that she organized. And perhaps she was, yet there was a completely new level of anxiety. level as Cameron showed up, cool and collected eyewear for a caramel. Leather trenchcoat Jim's lawyer is 2 steps behind him. Stood holding a second folder with the label, only to show that the court didn't spend time swiftly speaking to the public about the harm. Brought on by the Novaral, originally requested a gag order for the tapes. On all parties that claim emotional, brand exploitation, harassment, and intentional defamation afterward. He gave the judge a written agreement that was genuine. Chrissy and Jim agreed to a contract for the creation of a documentary under the co-branded name Love Always Wins, a series that included requirements for emotional purity, brand defense, and exclusivity representation, the kind of records that indicate you penetrate hearts, not just shatter them. Agreements, and the judge carefully read the paper. Bypage then gave Chrissy a direct look. Where were you throughout development, Lampkin? Chrissy in this series made sexual contact with Mr. Giles and Mr. Cameron. She simply nodded without blinking or sighing. Yes, that one phrase blew the mama. Jones let out a loud scream in the courtroom, and white lips and fingers interlocked on the table. The judge shook and said, "Were you aware that making this relationship public might hurt your co-branded company's reputation?" An additional yes. The court did not reply, but did someone in the room, muttered the gallery as she prepared. Herself. A different voice yelled out. She doesn't even give a damn, and perhaps she didn't because what transpired next was verified. Each time I had a suspicion that the internet had been yelling. After many weeks, Cam's attorney came to the bench without any showmanship or cautions. Just gentle words that gave me a start throughout the whole courtroom via we would want to propose one for the entire courtroom. The court authorized the last tape in the harbor, brought out a monitor, and everyone changed it to slow static, followed by a voice. Chrissy is sitting glom-free and without makeup. Yandy Smith's opposite in what appeared to be a production trailer. She claimed to love him, but was fed up with lying. Not in the way that Jim wants him to live, and all I wanted was a minute. I was told by Cam that Yon Dandy looked fidgety and uneasy, and then added, "You understand that won't remain a secret?" Chrissy Lynn took a taste of something from one cup and chuckled if it spilt. Leaks that I haven't disclosed for 10 years. Allow in the courtroom, the fire returned. When the screen went black, no one moved. Even the judge, until he eventually inquired, "Mrs. Mann, is this movie real?" Chrissy, "Well, do you get this?" Disproves your assertions of good faith in your collaborative business ventures. Chrissy Lampkin, although the gavel did not decline. The damage was completed when Jim's group formally alleged in a countersuit that emotional fraud, deliberate dishonesty, and brand. Not only was the manipulation personal, but also federal and financial as well. But only when there isn't much worse. Then a courtroom. The clerk intervened and muttered something in. He nodded in the judge's ear and gave the remarks that changed the contentious situation into a likely criminal investigation. This court has documents from Ms. Lamine, and Homeland Security is currently a person of interest in a continuing inquiry claiming digital manipulation as well as nonprofit misuse of video mentioned in previous sessions. Audible gasps. The assistant to Mona Scott is seated quietly in a folder placed on the floor towards the back. VH1's attorney appeared very far away, and Your Honor, we protest that this is outside the authority in this matter. The judge closed. The objection has been noted. However, this will be directed to Chrissy's attorney. It appeared like the battery had been torn out of his back, and at last Chrissy seemed frightened, her eyes falling to her hands shaking on the table, and Cameron observed it as the words remained silent. At the film's debut, he looked like a guy, aimed himself at Jim. He got up, but loud, not angry, but systematic and calm, shifted to the courtroom center and turned to the judge. Chrissy Lampkin allowed Jim Jones to just reply, "Did I get any of it, or was I simply the cover story?" Chrissy was unable to respond due to the ensuing silence was louder than The audio is not as loud as the leak and louder than Mona's and Cam's smirks. Denials were a man's silence. Finding the one he had always wanted was solely focused on the plan. The judge asked for a little break, but the press was burning before Jim had even made it left the courthouse. Shadroom and all of the filthy YouTubers in existence had begun cutting the tape. Fragments and the hashtag began, Chrissy Lawman is trending within minutes. Acknowledges that Cameron was the one who through Jim VH1 revealed that Homeland deserved better. Cameron files, followed by the final blow during the break period of the court. Cameron's a teaser trailer was shared on Twitter by the crew. A 30-second clip shows Chrissy in a sporting a dipping set hoodie at a motel room chatting on the phone while visiting Jim's on tour. I've had the voice on for 2 hours. Are you coming or not? It's the opposite end already. The screen downstairs turns black. In the video, the text fades. Tried to hide the fact that they would be returning shortly. The atmosphere was radioactive, and the court, even the judge, was worn out. Reopened the case, requesting both legal groups for concluding remarks and postponed until the last motions were discussed next week. But, to be honest, the public verdict has already been dropped. The press's viewpoint in Jim's face and Chrissy, L. Kine's confessions certainly wouldn't show up by the time. Jim departed from the courtroom where his group had already removed every picture. Chrissy Jones, his mother on social media, refused to speak to the media, but was watched as Chrissy was weeping quietly in the hallway. Lucan went out the rear door with just a huge black hoodie with no words, sunglasses, and the silent insight that a program had replaced her reality. The cautionary tail camera did not depart properly. He stayed out of the courthouse foyer, having coffee and conversing with his attorney, a smile that never goes away. A reporter asked him, "Why now?" Cameron simply smiled and stated, "I awaited the proper resolution." Then, like the credits, he left, spending a couple hours playing behind him. Later, Chrissy was attacked by a last leak, sent a text message from a burner online. Phone to an MSY Mona contact that has been preserved when Scott Young says, "Delete everything." Although he is aware that everything is completed, nothing was deleted or stored and now belongs to the brand is gone and the world is a love story. Played on repeat, shattering the reality. Forever and half an hour later, everyone was seated again, but this time the atmosphere had changed. And nobody looked at Judge Chrissy Lampkin. Not the court reporters, not even her personal attorney sat by herself, as though the air surrounding her had become thicker. As though remorse had at last sunk its hooks into Jim Jones's instant. She was seated, arms crossed, and emotionless. His expression was one of fury rather than loss. A man who no longer needed to talk as the reality had already spoken on his behalf. Followed by the demon, acting as though during lunch, presented the matter to the clerk's helper, walked in once again. Using a flash drive that is contained in an evidence bag bearing the HSI Homeland Stamp investigations into security as it was, the judge unzipped it, inserted it, searing through his fingers, entered the courtroom system, and looked to theorem. And thus includes sealed metadata files and surveillance audio, bringing up Miss Scott Young and Miss Lampkin regarding how charity has handled donations tied to a VH1 company established in 2021. Everyone stood still. Even Chrissy. Counsel swiftly opposed. Your Honor has nothing to do with the current circumstance. However, the court closed it down once more. So we're not talking about innocence. We're talking about admissibility, and the first file that was played was acceptable. Chrissy's voice on the phone once again. Background sounds of the talk matched a backstage VH1 event. Probably I told Mona to redirect the funds. Jim didn't have to be aware that we were using his name to advertise the gala, which is everything else. Went to oversee the post-production process for another. The feminine voice that replied alarmed Chrissy. Chrissy said that Lampkin was a scam. Honestly, no. That's the tape on television. Concluded. The courtroom remained still because this was more than simply a heartbreak. Jim may have been the victim of federal wire fraud. The prestige and resemblance of the name were used to divert donations in charity mailings. Contributions that were returned to the unapproved production costs Jim's attorney raised once more. Your Honor, we urgently need permission to include these details in our ongoing lawsuit for defamation of a brand and sabotage of emotions. The court nodded, motion approved, and VH1's legal representative stood pale, obviously perspiring. Said something to a helper before turning to the judge, and asked whether they could deal with the Chambers Court. The judge rejected it since it was in the public eye. Too big and viral to be behind oak doors, the attorney for VH1 said. We were not being informed of our financial routing, unaware of the secondary production logs or illegal video. The court asked, and Ms. Scott Young, the individual, the representative, held off on becoming accessible for naturally she was, since Mona Scott Young had vanished, leaving no emails behind. Public statements that aren't even cryptic. Nothing she knew about the Instagram quote. The championship wave was approaching, and she was almost returning to court after being halfway to the bunker after the tsunami hit. Chrissy, at last, Lampkin, spoke up without defending or refuting anything but to admit she got up by herself and said, I messed up. She softly said, not to the judge, to nobody in particular, but not to Jim Jones specifically. I repeatedly reminded myself that I may manipulate the picture and show the genuine feelings that I thought I could adore him publicly and get better privately. But Jim didn't lose both halves of me. Observe her as she started. Cameron was sincere, as Jim Jones was, and I simply ceased being honest with both of them. And it developed into a program that I was unable to leave the judge. Allowed her to go on, maybe because either out of interest or because this was the last a screenplay page that nobody wanted. I don't. Chrissy wrote at the end, ask Jim and the fans for forgiveness, or I want the truth to be documented. But not anybody else, because I'm fed up with hiding in scenes. After she took a seat, there was silence for around a minute before the judge said, taking into account the severity of the evidence presented by the opposing monetary interests and the danger of ongoing harm to the public's reputation, court will accept all claims, awaiting a final hearing for damages, and the nonprofit is being forwarded by this court. Matter to federal authorities for further investigation was completed. However, emotionally and technically, Cameron had already left, not waiting for the final decision. He added one more thing to his story in a single sentence. She just let out the loudest scream I've ever heard. Maybe an excerpt from I Truly by Dipset. Chrissy Lampkin left the game after it finished, via the rear once more, with no security. Mona Jim left last in the entourage. His team attempted to entice him too. He threw them off and walked after pressing the exit. Via the front door into the reporters are flashing throng cameras. Shouting, but he remained silent, shut the door of his SUV and departed. The internet was on fire by dusk. Once more, a staff communication that was leaked from Reddit was accessed by VH1 inside production. Pictures of Mona's last internal message prior to the controversy's arrival in court. Documents that state, if that footage leaks, we're done. But Jim Jones remains unaware. Half of what was planned was approved. Manage the remainder. Comments erupted. Chrissy used his trauma as a storyboard. Did not lie on television. She rehearsed it on VH1. The next Fire Festival is coming up. And then one more, and one more. Drop. An anonymously posted video showed Jim and Chrissy Lampkin were eliminated, creating a trailer for Netflix when he questioned her. Are you prepared to start a life? With a season or with me? She laughs and responds, why not both? However, there is currently no Netflix season, no existence, and no future removed sponsors, and put a halt to manufacturing. Within a day, the series was put on hold. The name of Mona was taken off the website. Every press contact for VH1 went dark. By dawn, Dipsit's representative Chrissy Lampkin was unfollowed on Instagram, and each intern who had previously the camera next to her performed Jim's bio, said, "Rebuilding Chrissy, don't ask me anything." Uploaded a single black square without a description or title, and hundreds of individuals in the comment section, "Was it worth it to come in?" You broke the last devoted one and sold a story to you, sold your soul, and then the final nail arrived. From Cam, he revealed the whole publication of the video they attempted to conceal, a 3-part series that will be released soon. The trailer doesn't even start until Friday, alongside Chrissy Lampkin. Instead, Jim shows up on a rooftop by himself. "I've spent my lifelong efforts to safeguard those who just required a stage." Next, there was a pause, then a transition. Too Black and the last words of the real story were never about affection, but rather about devotion, and the world watched as the two safeguard. Not even the brand, not the picture, not even the background. 3 names: Chrissy, Cameron, Jim Jones. And an irretrievably damaged heritage since the movie is available and it's never disappearing. But now that everything is out in the confessions and the open footage, we must question the courtroom collapse. Was it a love tale? We all cheered for Dipet's commitment, stated to be based on or entirely on a skillfully created illusion, stitched together by manufacturers who were driven by secrets and marketed to us indefinitely, because Jim Jones lost more than simply a relationship. He lost his Chrissy Lampkin, took on the legacy, that courtroom, and destroyed it in one voicemail, one sentence, and one quiet at a time. And Cameron did not simply publish a "he set fire to the entire cassette machine and left with just the truth." That was important, but now it's how much time do you have, Chrissy? Did she ever love Jim, or was she just taking advantage of him to enhance her reputation? Was it her plan or her salvation? Don't forget to leave your theories in the comments. If you're still with us, hold back. Incredulous, click the like button to maintain the story, and if you want to see every leaked video that twists every secret treachery in the courtroom prior to the internet burying it, ring the bell and subscribe, because this tale is not yet finished. And the following leak might just change what you believed I knew.